Hi, I'm George Maestri, and today we're going to take a look at how to use photographs as reference in SketchUp. And specifically, we're going to use the Match Photo feature. So I'm going to take this image here, and we're going to take the building in the center of this image, and we're going to match the perspective of the scene, and then go ahead and duplicate the shape of this building in SketchUp. So I'm going to start off by using the Match Photo feature. Now, on the Mac, you'll find it under Window, and you'll find a Match Photo option. On the PC, you'll find it in the default tray, and we have a Match Photo option here, and we just want to make sure it's checked, and then we can go over into our default tray, and we should have Match Photo. So however you open it, the interface should look pretty much like this. Now, the interface is grayed out at the start. The only option here is this little plus sign. So all we have to do is go New Match Photo and hit plus, and that allows us to bring that photograph into the scene. So I have this matchphoto.jpg. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And when I do, notice how all this stuff comes up in addition to the image. So we have all of these red and green lines with handles. We have a grid here, and we also have an axis that we can use. Now, before we get to this, I'm going to go ahead and show you what's in the actual Match Photo interface. So the first thing is that we have a grid. We can turn it on, or we can turn it to auto, which essentially turns it off. Then we have to decide the style of the image. So what type of image are we trying to match? This is an inside corner. This is a top and above, so we're kind of doing an aerial view. And this is an outside corner. So we're working with an outside corner, which is going to be this corner here on the building. And then which planes are we going to be working with? And I'm going to go ahead and leave that at the default. And if we want to, we can change that just to reflect whichever plane we want to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave this as the red plane, and we can actually toggle these on and off as we want. And then we also have spacing, which is the default grid spacing. I'm going to leave that at the default as well. So before we click done, we need to match the perspective of the scene to the photo. So I'm going to go ahead and start off by selecting this axis and moving it to a known good position. Now, if you want, you can zoom in this interface by simply rolling your mouse wheel. If you middle click and drag, that's the same as a pan tool. So I just want to make sure that I get this pretty close to the bottom corner of that building. And now we can start to match perspective. So I'm going to select one of these green handles, and I'm going to move it down in the scene towards the bottom, and then go ahead and move this other one. And now what we're trying to do is get these to match up with a known horizontal line in the scene. So in this case, these boards are very nice because they are known horizontal lines. So I'm going to go ahead and match it up to the shadow of those two boards. And then I'm going to do the same for the other green line here. And this time I'm going to go up a little bit higher. Now what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get perspective. So it's a good idea to keep these as far apart as possible. Now I'm still going to be working on this wall, but I just want to work on the top of the wall and the bottom. So I have a really good line here, and I just want to make sure that this lines up here. So now I've got the green perspective in place. Now let's go ahead and get the red perspective. So I'm going to use this line here along the bottom of the windows. And so that looks like a pretty good horizontal line. So I'm going to use this bottom of this sill here and see if I can get a pretty good line. And that looks fairly straight. So that's going to be my first option. And then we can also go, again, up a little bit further. And in this case, I'm going to use the line of this top board here. Now, once I have that in place, and it all looks good. All I have to do is click Done. Now, when we do that, a couple of things happen. First off, it resets the perspective of the scene, and it creates a new scene in my scenes window. So if I were to orbit off of this, notice how the picture disappears. And you shouldn't be alarmed with this, because all we have to do is double click on the match photo scene in my scenes window, and it will come back. Now that I have this, I can start to model against this building. So let's go ahead and just do the front of the building and some rough shapes here. So I went ahead and orbited off of it. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on that again. And let's just zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to start with my rectangle tool. I'm going to snap it to that bottom corner, the origin, and left click and drag. And I'm going to hit my left arrow here. So that way I'm matching the green axis. And going to go ahead and just bounding box around the entire front of that building. So now I've got a rectangle that pretty much matches the front of that building. And now I can take another rectangle and do this inset here. Take another rectangle, snap, and do this inset here. And I should be able to now erase this detail. Now, when I have that, I can now use my push-pull tool. The hotkey is the letter P, and I can just push that back to match the depth of that board there. Now I'm starting to get some geometry, and if I were to orbit off of this, you would see that I'm actually getting some geometry. And I can always go back to my match photo by just double-clicking on that scene. Now, one of the things I want to do is I want to get the roof line of this building. So I'm going to go ahead and use my line tool, and I'm just going to draw a simple edge along here to match the bottom of that roof. And then I'm going to orbit out of that and just draw a line along the back. So this is where my roof hits on both sides. And then I'm going to snap to the middle point here and just draw down. So now I've got kind of a line that bisects the top, and then I know where the edge of my roof is. And so I can use this to draw the roof. So I'm going to go ahead and snap to that midpoint. Now notice when I get all the way to the top, it actually is overlapping this. So what I need to do is bring this down a little bit. And what I can do is draw a line that goes just a little bit in from that corner, which is how the roof is really built. And then I can do the same on this side. And once I have that, I can erase my guidelines. And now I have a face that I can push-pull. But before I do that, I'm going to go back into my perspective view or my match photo view. And then I'm going to hit P to push-pull. And I'm going to pull that out. And notice how this matches pretty darn close to the actual structure. So now that I have this, you can see I'm getting the basics of this building. And now all I have to do is start drawing details. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a few details here. I'm going to draw a line down here to represent this edge. Do another line here along blue. And then I'm going to go back into my match photo view, and let's go ahead and start drawing things such as windows and doors. So one of the things I can do is I can snap to that edge and snap to this edge here. And those pretty much represent the top and bottom of those windows. And now I can use my rectangle tool to draw those in. Again, I just want to match those. And then this door, as you can see, it's kind of papered over, but I can certainly draw a rectangle that outlines that, and maybe draw a line across the bottom and the top of this edge here. And this will give me a bit of reference for the door. And if we come off of this, you can see how this is starting to work. And I can now start to erase some of these extraneous edges here. And now as I get this, you can see that I've got this building is starting to come into shape. Now, I can certainly do other things. I can inset these windows, so I can use my push-pull tool and maybe push those in 1 inch. And just double-click on the other ones to get those. But now, one of the things I'm working on is the assumption that the scale is correct. Now, the scale may not be correct for this, so we can fix that by using our tape measure tool. Now, we need to have a known dimension, and once we have that, we can use that to match the scale. Now, I don't really have a known dimension, but I do know that doors are typically 80 inches tall. So I'm going to go ahead and just go to the top of this door and to the bottom, and then I'm going to type in 80 inches, and that'll be a rough estimate. It may not be exact, but it'll be close enough. So if I type in 80 inches and hit enter, it'll ask me if I want to resize the model, and I will say yes. And now the model gets much bigger. But if I go back into Match Photo, the photo itself also gets bigger. So everything lines up. So now that I have this, you can see that we can keep going and continue to model against this. But one of the things we might want to do is actually use this photograph as reference for the textures on the building. So all I have to do is select some faces. I'm going to go ahead and left-click and drag, select all that front of the building. And once those are selected, I can just hit this button that says Project Textures from Photo. And it says, do you want to trim partially visible faces? I'll say yes. And when I do that, it projects that texture onto the front of the building. So now I can actually use the photograph as a texture if I want. And once this texture is here, this will make modeling that much easier because now I can actually just draw on the model itself to get my outline. So if I wanted, for example, to outline this portion of this, I could certainly do that. And now I have this interface, and I can push that in or out if I want. So as you can see, Match Photo is a great way to rough in a model from an existing photograph. So if you're doing things such as surveying a site or something like that, you can take the buildings in the image and model them to get a rough idea as to the volume of the scene.